All right, tonight's guest speaker is a good friend of mine and my business partner in Peak Performance Mindset Coaching. Lisa has over 20 years of experience of as a transformational leader, award-winning speaker, and my door just shut, so this is good. I'm going to keep out all the spirits that want to. By spirits, I mean one particular, which we call Lucifer. She's my black kitten. Lucy Fur is her name. Lisa is also trained as in Winner's Mindset. Winner's Mindset is a program with Bob Reese. Bob Reese, if I remember right, a big in professional athletes, right?
He was the trainer for the New York Jets.
There you go.
There you go.
And as a certified hypnotherapist and master practitioner of NLP, she helps entrepreneurs and high performers take what they have and launch to the next level. Lisa's also trained as a why coach. Why, Lisa, I might ask? Now, with the Why Institute, and this is based on Simon Sinek's work about finding your why. And she actually is someone who can help many, many people find their why. Lisa has a passion about studying and traveling, and especially enjoys mixing the two. And she's traveled all over the world, if I remember right, Lisa, learning in-depth knowledge of both how the mind works and a lot about shamanism. And there's a tie to tonight's subject with shamanism. Lisa's also a mom of two amazing grown children, Max and Haley. And she lives in Vermont with her wonderful rescue dog, Lily, who I happen to know very well.
Yeah.
Lisa Schermerhorn, I'm going to feature you.
Okay. And then I'll have my, so now I have to share my screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Share your screen.
See my messy desktop. And then I got to go into my PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And I will do the view slideshow.
There you go. And if you got a chance
There we
to see
go.
Lisa's background, Lisa lives in a Lincoln log cabin. Real logs, not really Lincoln logs, but real logs. So Lisa, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin, and it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I am so excited to do this talk tonight because it's the first time that I'm really getting a chance to out myself, the other part of me. This part of me that studied for 20 years with shaman all over the world. And what's really cool is the study of epigenetics is the science behind all of the things that I've learned. So it's amazing how our lineage, our ancestors actually impact us at a much deeper level than we can even imagine. So these are pictures of me in Peru, to the left of the twin shaman. They're pretty amazing. They used to come to the US quite a bit, but they've retired. And then all the way to the right is the Taraba tribe in Costa Rica. They were a big hike into the jungle, and they live off the land, and they're pretty amazing people. And if you ever want that opportunity, they love bringing people in and teaching them all about their plant medicine and what they do. So I want to thank you again for being here. And why isn't this going? So epigenetics, what is it and how does it impact our lives? Well, epigenetics genetics describes the way DNA sequences in our genes are passed from one generation to the next. Epigenetics is described as how it is expressed. And you can have several people in a family and it doesn't get expressed in everyone. There might be a life experience that happens in your life that will trigger that expression. So everyone may carry this in their DNA, but it may or may not be expressed. So I'm going to give you some information. This was fascinating to me, that Princeton University did a study with worms. I know this is a really disgusting picture, so I'll get through it quickly. But they found that these worms, when they ate deadly bacteria, as they were dying, they laid eggs. And the offspring of those eggs knew not to eat that deadly bacteria. And they actually tested this up to 4 generations. So this went into their DNA. As they were dying, they were able to switch the DNA so that their offspring could survive. Next is a study that they did on mice. And this was a study from Scientific American Journal. They showed that they subjected these mice to this chemical that I can't pronounce, so please forgive me, but it smells like cherries and almonds. And every time they smelled the smell, they would shock these mice. So they began to associate the smell to the shock. And every time they smelled that, they began to shudder and shake. So then what happened was their pups, when they had that smell around them, they would run, but they were never shocked. And then the grandchildren of those original mice also had the same experience. So this is how we switch these little things in our DNA through evolution, and we affect the generations from one generation to the next. Okay, whoops. So this is where the study happens with humans. This was really fascinating to me. There was in 1944, October 1944, the Nazis basically blockaded the Netherlands and basically shut off their food supplies. And 20,000 people died of starvation. So when they were finally liberated, there were a number of pregnant women, and they studied these pregnant women, and scientists found that those who were in utero during that famine actually were a few pounds heavier than average, because the mothers were starving. They quieted a gene in their unborn children that burned the body's fuel. So when the children reached middle age, they had higher LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, and triglyceride levels. They also suffered higher rates of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and schizophrenia. So when scientists looked into why they found these children, they found that these children carried a specific chemical mark, an epigenetic signature on one of their genes. Again, this was another study with descendants of the Holocaust. Dr. Rachel Yehuda, the director of the Traumatic Stress Studies Division at the Icahn School of Medicine in Mount Sinai in New York, conducted a study in 2015 on 40 Holocaust survivors. She found that they had epigenetic changes linked to a gene and their levels of cortisol. So their cortisol levels were higher, and that this was directly due to their stress response. And they also found a distinctive pattern of DNA methylation, another epigenetic marker. The study concluded that both parents and unborn children were affected on a genetic level. So I love Carl Jung, a lot of the things that I've studied, but he does a lot about the collective unconscious. And I love this quote: until we bring the unconscious patterns into light, we are destined to repeat them. So the thought is, and with the indigenous people as well, is that when trauma is suppressed, it keeps acting out in other ways. It's about bringing it to the forefront, and acknowledging it is when it can be healed. So how do you know that an issue belongs to you? So one of the things that I always say is all the issues belong to you because you're living here in this life and you have to deal with it. even though it may be something from an ancestor, you still have to deal with the behavior in this lifetime. So it's up to you to heal, to choose to heal it and break the pattern. And when you heal the pattern, according to the Iroquois tribe, you will heal your ancestors up to 7 generations back and your descendants 7 generations forward. So breaking these patterns aren't easy. So the first step is forgiveness for all parties, including yourself. So one of the things as we move forward, because I'm going to give you some examples of some of my clients' experiences, I'd like you to look at and think about some of the core language that you may use or core experiences that are from your family. So let's look for patterns and things like that, because that's how you can get some hints as to whether or not this is yours or whether or not it belongs to an ancestor that's come in. So you want to look for intense and urgent words that are used to describe your greatest fear, feelings that live in you but aren't necessarily from you. You don't understand why you have this feeling because nothing in your life really had an impact in your life to make you feel this way. Or instead of words, your core language can be expressed in verbal and nonverbal ways, such as it could come out in addictions. So if you see patterns of addiction in family, patterns of certain diseases, alcoholism, sex addiction, so you want to look for patterns that come across in your family as well. So language that repeats itself in your life, but doesn't quite make sense from your life and your experiences, ages that repeat. And I'm going to tell you a story that's really fascinating. This is actually a really sad story. But there was a boy who was 19 years old. And when he was 19, when he turned 19, all of a sudden he had this paralysis around going to sleep at night. It was so bad that he ended up having to give up a college scholarship. And it was an athletic scholarship. He had this feeling that every single time he went to go to fall asleep, he thought he was going to die. And he didn't know why. And after a couple of years of this, he did some investigating, and he discovered that he had an uncle who died at the age of 19. He worked for the utility company up in Canada, and he got lost during a blizzard, and they found him face down in the snow. He had frozen to death. And so this boy from the next generation, from his uncle, was carrying this trauma that was in the family that no one ever acknowledged because he didn't even know that this uncle existed. And I know that this is an extreme example, but just showing you an example of if something happened suddenly at an age that didn't make sense to you. Also, emotions, behaviors, and symptoms that repeat. So this is a story about a client of mine who was of Brazilian descent, and she had indigenous healers in her family lineage. And her dream was always to become a healer. But she had this belief that she could never make money as a healer. And ironically, to pay the bills, she worked for a pharmaceutical company. And she hated it. She was absolutely miserable. And she longed to work with the herbal and natural medicines and wanted to start a business of her own, but she was convinced that she would lose everything and starve. So we did a guided meditation. We asked her higher self and her subconscious mind to take us to the root cause of that fear and anxiety. And what came up was, going back many generations, when the Portuguese invaded Brazil, they were all about converting the indigenous people to Catholicism. So they had to come up with a way to keep these people from practicing their own heritage and their own beliefs and get them. So they told them that if they were a healer, that would be a gift from God. And if it was a gift from God, they were not allowed to charge for it, which caused all of these people who were healers to begin to starve, they had to leave their business, they had to leave that industry because they couldn't get paid. And so she acknowledged that ancestor, and she thanked it for all that her ancestor had been through. And then we imagine this healing going through the DNA all the way through from that ancestor all the way through to her current self. It, along with some other things that we had to do around some fears that she had about finances, she was able to finally quit her job in the pharmaceutical industry and open a healing practice. So now I have another story of a client of mine whose grandmother had some issues with sweets. And so what happened was her grandmother lived in New York City, and I hope I'm telling the story okay. Her grandmother was obsessed with sweets. And she was very, well, actually, no, her grandmother was very wealthy. Her grandmother was very wealthy and had this very wealthy family. And she fell in love with a boy who did not have a lot of money. And she married this boy and ended up getting, basically, her family disowned her. And because she was so sad and grieving, she began to eat. And she ate a lot of sweets and put on weight. And then her husband had a hard time with the fact that she had gotten so big that he asked her to lose the weight and she couldn't. And he ended up divorcing her. So she had this tremendous amount of grief and that she was feeling with sweets because she was now abandoned on both sides. So she had all these issues. So my client had some major issues with eating sweets obsessively. Like her kitchen didn't feel safe to her. She didn't have the willpower to walk by anything that was sweet. So we ended up going back to her grandmother, and she had a conversation with her and acknowledged her. And again, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between you actually talking to someone and having a dream or watching in a movie. So if your subconscious mind believes that this is happening, you can have a healing. So using your imagination and using your belief system is very important to this work. So for my client, she went back and had a conversation with her grandmother and acknowledged her pain. And in this conversation, her grandmother was shocked because no one had ever really acknowledged her before. And that allowed to start healing, and that there could be some forgiveness that went down through her lineage to her, and to allow her to have a healing and start to deal with her obsession with sweets, to give her some freedom to move forward. I have another client of mine who has some issues with making cold calling because he was worried about what other people would think. His father was a raging alcoholic and emotionally violent. And whenever he asked for something, his father would procrastinate and said no. And he had a lot of shame about asking for things for himself. So when he came to business, he was very successful, but he was moving into a new venture. He had a lot of pain around having to make phone calls and speak to strangers. And so he found himself in this place where it was paralyzing him. And he knew that this new venture was going to, it was in jeopardy. So we talked about, we had him imagine his father in front of him and had a conversation with him in his mind because his father had passed on. And during their conversation, I encouraged him to say the things to him that he always wanted to say. And he did. And he allowed his father to respond. And the message from his father, which was fascinating as they dialogued back and forth, was he said, I never got to have the life that I always wanted for myself. I wanted to be a writer, and my father forced me to go to law school because he was a lawyer, and I had to live my father's life. I never got to live mine. So what his father was doing was projecting his frustration from his own father. So what I find that I do is sometimes when we have awareness of this, we'll go and we did a healing with his father and his uncles, called in the uncles, and then did another healing with the grandfather and called him in, and then there was a healing that took place. And so this was very powerful for my client and allowed him to have have the forgiveness and see his father from the perspective of an adult and not from the child who was afraid of his father and all of that anxiety that he carried. So one of the things that's really important about this work is discovering, it doesn't have to be a sentence, but your core fear, something that doesn't feel like it really belongs to you, that doesn't make sense. I know people who have this, fear, or will have a fear of heights, and they're like, I have no idea why, or fear of putting their head under the water and don't know why. It could be anything. So the very cave that you're afraid to enter turns out to be the very source of what you are looking for. So examples of core sentences. These are usually broad-reaching, overarching sentences you're going to look for, like, I'm all alone, or I'm afraid I'm always going to be alone. They're general sentences. They will reject me. They'll abandon me. I'll lose my family. I don't deserve to live. They'll put me away. I'll never make enough money. Everyone hates me. I'll go crazy. I'll let them down. I'll do something terrible. They will betray me. And I want you, as we go through, start to think about something that's an overarching belief for you that you're not sure that's yours, because I'm going to actually take you on a journey. We don't have a lot of time, so hopefully you'll all get to meet an ancestor, or at least have a feeling of them. So this is actually, I recently got a photo. This is my father's mother's family. They were visiting family in Poland right before World War II, when they all were sent off to the concentration camps. So my grandmother is, trying to think, I think she's in the middle, sitting down. She had 8 sisters and brothers. So there was a lot of work that I have done on healing that in my lineage and that fear. So your DNA can shift, and you can heal the issue within and then heal your ancestors and your descendants. And one of the things that's really important is forgiveness. And I know there's a group of people here that are on this call that have done something called the Ho'oponopono, which is an ancient Hawaiian form of forgiveness. You're welcome to use that when we do this work. You can just have a conversation and send them love. Whatever works for you. So what I'm going to do is take the next 15 minutes or so, and we're going to go on a journey. So before I do that, I wanted to check to see if anyone has any questions about this, because all I'm going to do is relax all of you. And then for those of you who've never done anything like this, what I'm going to do is ask your higher wisdom and ask your higher self to go to the root cause of an issue that you have. And even if you don't know what it is, just ask them to take you to an ancestor. And now, some people can see. Some people are very visual. Some people can hear. Some people feel. And some people also have a knowing. When I first started doing this work, I didn't see anything. I would just get a feeling and a knowing, and it almost felt like I was making these stories up. So just let the story play out. So I just wanted to check with everyone and make sure that if anyone has any questions before we move on, or any concerns before we move on, or is everyone comfortable? All good? All right. So what I'd like you to do now is all of you take a deep breath and close your eyes. So I want you to get relaxed. And I want you to take a deep breath and just clear your mind and calm your body and just relax. And I want you to imagine, and when I say imagine, I mean to visualize, see, hear, sense, or just plain know that the suggestions that I'm making and the thoughts that you are having are actually happening deep within your inner being. And I want you to imagine a beautiful white light above you, emanating from the top of the universe, illuminating your entire world. It makes you feel so good and so relaxed, for you know that this is the light of our Creator, the light of the universe, and the strength of your own spirit. And so now as this light comes closer, this is the light of your divine wisdom, of your higher wisdom, your higher self. And as you're breathing, I want you to really get your senses hyper, just hyper, I want you to feel the clothes that are touching your skin. Feel where your shirt ends, and you can feel the air on your skin where it's not covered. And really have an awareness, a hyper awareness around your senses of what you're feeling on your skin. And now I want you to imagine you can smell everything. You can smell, everything is very sensitive, and you can smell at a much deeper level. And now you can taste. You can feel your tongue in your mouth and really taste. All of your taste buds are aware. And I want you to imagine, now that your senses are awakened and that knowingness is awakened, I want you to imagine that white light is now pouring down through the top of your head. And I want you to go down deep into your heart, because your heart is where all your wisdom is and your knowledge. And we're going to imagine that you have this connection from your heart to your head, almost like a gold thread. And I want you to connect that gold thread from your heart to your head, so that you can get this information deep within your heart and your soul, where this information is collected, and it will make its way to your mind when you're ready. But right now, I want you to drop into your heart, and I want you to take a deep breath and count to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold for 3. 1, 2, 3. Exhale for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold for 3. 1, 2, 3. I want you to try and keep that rhythmic breathing in for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold for 3. 1, 2, 3. And exhale for 6. As we continue with this beautiful white light, it's going down on your face, through your eyes. Expand that feeling through your eyes and relaxing the rest of your face. Loosen your jaw. down your neck and your throat, into your chest and shoulders, down into your abdomen, down your arms, the tips of your fingers, down your shoulders, your abdomen, your back, down your spine, to your pelvis, slowly down your legs, to your knees, and all the way out down to the tips of your toes. And just keep breathing, go deeper and deeper. And now I'd like to ask your divine self, your divine wisdom, to take you to the root cause of an issue that you have in this life that's directly related to a trauma or an incident to an ancestor. And I ask that we travel through your DNA. So imagine this beautiful light traveling through your DNA, going all the way back to a time when you have an ancestor who is struggling with difficulties. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes to just allow this ancestor to show up. And when they show up, I want you to have a conversation with that ancestor. If you don't see them, just experience what it feels like to be in their presence. Some people see, some people feel. So I want you to then hear what they have to say, and then offer them love, unconditional love, and forgiveness. And take your time, and I'll let you know when it's time to come back. Just continue breathing. Have a conversation with your ancestor. And if you can even fill them in on the pain that is caused their descendants if they're resistant, and tell them how much it would mean to have this forgiveness. Make sure you truly speak from your heart and let them know, because they were also your wisdom keepers. So you want to appreciate and honor their sacrifices and the wisdom that has come down your lineage as well. So as you're with them, thank them for all the brilliance that you have as well, and what has helped to make you who you are. You continue to have this conversation. If there's other family members that need to connect to have a healing with your ancestor, bring them in. There's other people that did your ancestor harm or that your ancestor did harm to. See if you can even get them to acknowledge each other. Now, as you get ready to come back, I'd like you to again thank that ancestor. And if you're not finished, know that you now have a direct line to this ancestor, that you can continue this work even if you're not complete. And if you are complete, thank them and know that you can journey back and communicate with this particular ancestor anytime that you like. And know that all of the releasing and all of the healing that has now happened, all the messages and insights that you received have been planted deeply in your subconscious mind. And now also in your conscious mind. So now that you have this awareness, so that this switches on now as you bring this healing forward. Imagine this beautiful healing light going from your ancestor all the way through to you, switching your DNA to a place of healing. And I want you to imagine this beautiful light, this healing light is now going through your entire being, healing your DNA, releasing all that is not yours. Breathe that in, and it's now transforming your DNA and your cell structure, your blood, your bones, your skin, your tissue, your organs, your entire being, from the top of your head to the tip of your toes, to the core of your soul. Breathe that in. Again, thank them. And then when you're ready, you may open your eyes, come back and feel joyous, knowing that you have healed your DNA. So take some time to wiggle around and get back into your body. So this was about connecting from your heart to your head. And as you travel through your DNA, we are prisoners of our thoughts. Who we are is not always who we think we are. By healing our lineage, we will have access to our gifts, belief systems, and our dreams. So now I'd love to I'd love to open this up to any questions, or if the people want to share their experience of what happened during that guided meditation. So Kevin, I don't know if you can switch to, I can stop the screen share.
You stop the screen share.
Yeah.
And we'll switch to bigger view here. You can switch to gallery view on your own. And you can come off mute, and if you want to ask any questions, or if you don't feel like talking, you can ask them through the chat as well. Or any comments, not just questions, but any comments about what we just did.
Yeah, I'm curious as to if anyone had any experiences, if they were actually able to have a conversation or had any kind of experience.
So I could feel my grandmother's presence.
Yeah.
I have always had this sensation that I was going to be rejected. No idea why. Never really was rejected by anyone that I can remember in my physical life right now. And as soon as that energy dropped down, her energy showed up.
Wow.
And my grandma had been rejected by her husband, her family for getting divorced. So that was kind of intense. My cheeks are warm.
Mm.
Wow.
I like it.
So in that process, were you able to have a conversation with her?
I was. That was really, really nice because I've actually been kind of missing her too. I was really close to her. She'd always tell me when no one was around, you're going to do big things. Grandma, you're so funny. And I'll catch whiffs of her fabric softener out of the blue. It's so, I'll be like, what does she want? Hello. Here we are. So this is pretty intense. I'm pretty happy right now.
Nice. And so how does it feel now when you think about that fear that you had? Oh,
It's not as intense. Like before I would be, oh, I'm gonna have to talk to people and my chest would tighten up and I'm like, I don't wanna, what if they don't like me? Now I'm like, give me a group of people. Hi everybody.
well, you're the first one to speak up, so you were the bravest. So I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Charity.
Yeah. Anyone else have an experience? Or does anyone have any questions about this? Because I know for most people, this is relatively new. This is something that the shamans have been doing for thousands of years. It's been that's part of a huge part of what they do is work with the ancestors and work with the lineage and help heal. And so the excitement was when I started to see the science of it come out and seeing it all proved. It made me feel a lot better about being able to bring this out to people and help them better understand. So anyone else want to talk about any experience they've had or any thoughts about this, or if this is new or something you...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know. Oh, is that you, Julie?
Julie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is there a way to differentiate, for us to differentiate when we're going into this state and having whatever experience we're having? Is there a way to differentiate if we're like imagining something from a movie maybe we saw, or like how can we make sure it's authentic and really our ancestor versus something we made up and we just don't know?
Right. You know what my answer is? If you get a feeling, if you get a healing from it, it works. Doesn't matter. Because sometimes the way spirit communicates with us is through images and through flashes so that you can associate. So like for me, I didn't see. So it was all about feeling, and it was all about, so I would get sensations in the beginning. And so I didn't know how to interpret that. So oftentimes you'll get images or something that'll help you construct the story. Now, whether or not it was true and you actually did get to communicate, if you feel different now, because again, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between reality and a dream and a movie. So you can use, by using your subconscious mind, your imagination, you can provide a healing and shift the way you think and feel. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Thoughts, questions, comments?
So, or a lot of people aren't showing their pictures. I want to make sure that everyone came back.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Lisa, at least in theory, what the conversation has sort of tilted toward misfortunes and hurts and negative experiences, and that shape you. And I'm wondering, is the reverse true? That somehow the benefits and triumphs and good things that your forebears had done could elevate you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think I did say that during the meditation, was that you also want to thank them because they sacrificed a lot and did a lot to make you who you are as well. So, you know, when someone comes to see me, they're not just generally coming because they say, hey, my ancestors were awesome and they made me this, this, and this, and, you know, this is why I'm great. So that's why I focus on the negative. But you're absolutely right. They also have a huge part of why we're resilient, why, you know, especially those of us who live in the US who've had ancestors that had to go through quite a bit to get here, and what they had to sacrifice, and what they had, I mean, what it takes to leave another country, another way of life, and what they had to do to get here. So yes, there's a lot to be grateful for. Thank you, Peter. No. Anyone else have any other thoughts or questions about this? Any comments about the process of what we went through? Did everyone, I'm just with a show of hands, did everyone actually get to have an experience? Did everyone actually get to see? Okay, so Julie, you did. Charity. Okay, Tom. Tom, any thoughts about what your experience was?
Oh my God.
What was that?
Who is that? That
I
made
know.
That was Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
thoughts. I had been, I was talking with my grandfather at first, but then I went to my great grandfather, who was a very successful person out of Newfoundland back 150 years ago, owned a couple of fishing vessels up there. And he's the one that made the move from there, him and my grandfather, to come down to America. But it was, I always talked to my grandfather, but this time I went back to my great grandfather. It was a different experience.
Very cool.
And it was
So-
on the positive side rather than something wrong about his success out there. Imagine 150 years ago, what it must have been like to have two fishing vessels out in the seas at all time.
Nice, nice. And how did it feel to have that conversation? And were you able to bring in your grandfather with your great grandfather as well? Were they
I
having?
brought him in, but there's going to be more conversation.
Yeah, good, good.
Okay.
Because now you have access to them, so you can
Right.
do that.
I've done exercises like this before, but it was always to my grandfather. And like
Yeah.
I say, this is a new venture going to my great grandfather.
Nice. Well, thank you, Tom.
Grandfather had a story that back in the Depression, he was losing his home. And he came within actually a couple of hours of losing it. So the only way he knew to prevent it from happening was to add a third floor to the house and increase the value of the house. So that weekend before, he actually put a third floor, a new apartment on the house. Went down to the bank on Monday morning, and the loan officer said to him after he explained what he did, he says, I guess I'm not taking your house. So thinking outside the box, I have great admiration for what he did there. But then again, like I say, this is the first time I thought about my great grandfather.
Yeah.
And what it must have been to, have that type of success with the fishing vessels.
Right. So bringing in the positive and the belief system of and the entrepreneurship, and look at what you do in Boston, helping all the entrepreneurs.
Right. Yeah.
And helping
exactly.
people in business. So yeah, that would come down the lineage.
Right. My brother's in business for himself. My
Yeah.
dad was, my grandfather, my great grandfather. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Anyone else have positive things they want to talk about? Any experiences at all? Because you can also contact me privately if you want to dive deeper into any of the experiences you had, or if you want to talk more about it. I always love feedback on stuff like this. These stories are so, they just light me up. I love them. So anyone else have any thoughts? Kevin, did you go talk to anyone?
Truthfully, I went so deep. I couldn't tell exactly what I was doing and who I was talking to. I knew I was talking to somebody or I was connecting with somebody, but I have a really hard time coming out of it. So I don't know where I was.
You might have gone pretty far back then.
I could have, and I would have liked to have known that. Grand or great grandfather, but I have no idea on which side because I really don't know. And so it was feeling like it was far back, but I just don't know who it was and what the message was. But you know what I felt though was just a connection. That's
Yep.
what I felt.
Good. That's the important part. As I said, not everyone always sees or gets the story, but there's just the feeling and the connection. And then you can go back and see if you can have a deeper connection. Or you know where to find me. We could do some deeper work on that.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
It's a quick one, and it's about what Kevin just said, so it was perfect. I don't know a lot of my family history, and my mom was an immigrant, and a lot of her side of the family is a big secret, and I just don't have a lot of information. So going along with what Kevin said, if I have some sort of connection or experience, but I have no idea who it is, and I don't know the stories, I don't have any history, is that still okay?
Absolutely. And that's why very few of us, unless you're a genealogist, can go back 7 generations, and most people don't see. So it's the actual acknowledgement of the ancestor, which is key. So you don't have to know their story. All you do is acknowledge them and thank them and send them love. And that
Okay.
provides the healing. What happens is when it travels down the lineage and it's unresolved trauma, like the story I told you about the 19-year-old boy, that stuff gets stuck. And so it's longing to be, that soul is longing to be acknowledged. That ancestor just wants to know that they were heard. So it's just the acknowledgement going back provides a huge healing. Absolutely. So. All right.
Any other questions, comments? So I'm going to make a guess. I'm going to guess that a lot of the ancestors of the people here were really quiet people.
No, you know what? This is new for most everyone.
Absolutely.
And so I want to commend all of you because I haven't really done this in groups. Usually I do this individually. So I want to thank all of you for your willingness to be part of this and to participate. And yeah, please stay in touch if any new information. Pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to any shifts of thoughts because you could have suddenly a shift and not know why. It could be related to a healing that you just had.
Wonderful. Lisa, if someone needs to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So they can get in touch with me through it's www.peakperformancemindsetcoaching.com because there's mind coaching, this other guy's website. So, or Lisa Schermerhorn1 @gmail.com. You can email me, or you can get me through Kevin. He knows where to find me.
Yeah. So if you forget any of that, didn't take notes, just go through the meetup because you're all joining the meetup to get here, and or email me because I email the meetup all the time. So yes, thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Thank your parents, your grandparents, your
Yes,
great-grandparents,
your ancestors.
so on. It is really wonderful, and it's science now. It's not just thought or woo woo. Science says
Well, it is
memories-
still woo-woo, but it's there's science
Yeah, there's a
behind the
little
woo.
woo-woo.
There's
but
science behind the woo now.
some of the science is woo-woo. But you know, if memories can come down through generations and they can prove that, it's amazing. We're learning so much more at such a deeper level from our ancestors than we can say, well, I learned this from my father, I learned this from my grandfather. Yeah, we're learning from many generations before. We just don't know it.
Right, and here's the other thing I meant to talk about. You heal this in you, you can heal that for your children and your grandchildren and your descendants up to 7 generations. So when you see patterns that go through your family and in your life, and you want to stop that and you heal that, that heals that for subsequent generations. So this is a very powerful technique to use. And also the honoring part of passing down the wisdom and the knowledge. So many of the previous generations didn't talk a lot about where they came from and what they had. So doing these journeys sometimes can give you a little more information about them and giving you a better sense of connection to them.
So amazing.
Yeah. So I want to thank all of you again. I really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope to hear from all of you. I see heads nodding. Thank you.